Hey everyone, in this video we're going to be setting up the modes on your quad using the Modes tab in Betaflight. On top of showing you how to set them up, I'm also going to be explaining each and every one of them the best I can and tell you which ones I recommend using. Without further ado, let's get right into it. But before we actually get into setting up the modes, there's something we need to do first. So turn on your drone and turn on your radio, just like I did. Plug in your drone to Betaflight, and then go to the Receiver tab, which is right on top of Modes. Click on it. Then you'll see a whole lot of things. But what we're interested in is the left side, where you see the bars and you see the roll, pitch, yaw, throttle, aux1, aux2, etc. What we got to do here is figure out which aux switches, so the aux switches are aux 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, are linked to which switch on your radio. So my radio only has 4 switches, so only 4 of these aux switches will actually work, but depending on the radio I have, you might even have 8 switches. So figure out which switches are which, all 8 of them, if you have 8. And while you flip these switches, write down which switches are which on a piece of paper, because this will be very useful for when we're setting up the modes later on in the video. To figure out which aux switches are which, you obviously need to plug a battery into your drone, or else your drone will not work. Because the only way to get power to your motors and your receiver and your VTX is with a battery. So let's just plug in a battery quickly. Just like this. And now, as you can see on my screen over here on Betaflight, all the aux switches went back to their first position. So now if, let's say I just move throttle, yaw, pitch, and roll, they all move, okay? This is perfect. That means my controller is connected. But now, what we're gonna do is flip switches and figure out which aux switch is linked to which switch on my radio, and write that down. So, for example, I'll flip this switch. Okay, so that means it's aux switch 1. My drone beeped because it's a switch that will activate something that cannot be activated while my drone is plugged into Betaflight. I'll show you, I'll explain all of that later. But yeah, so flip the switches and figure out which aux switches are which, and write that down on paper. Once you've done that, we're going to move on to the next step. Alright, so now let's move on to the Modes tab. Click on the Modes tab right under Receiver, and I already have a couple set up. As you can see, I can actually remove them. Let's just remove all of that. Do I have any right over here? Okay. There we go. Now, before setting up the modes, I'm actually going to explain every single one of the modes, and there are a whole lot of them, so just get ready to listen. This might take a little bit. So, let's start with the very first one. First one, the arm mode. This is the mode that every quad needs. This is the mode that will let you arm the drone or disarm the drone if there's a problem. Very important for safety reasons, because you don't want to turn on your drone and all of a sudden the propeller starts spinning right away. You don't want that. So the arm switch is very useful. When you flip the arm switch on your quad, the propellers are going to start spinning on your drone, and you're going to get ready to fly. If there's a problem, you hit something, for example, and you can't take back control of the drone, disarm your drone with the switch, and your drone will fall to the ground, and everything's going to be okay. So that's the arm switch. You need the arm switch. You really, really need it. Next mode, angle mode. So, angle mode is actually a flight mode where when you fly, everything, you have an angle limiter on your drone. So if you push your pitch forward the most you can, it will limit you at a certain point. This is very good for beginners because there's no chance of you flipping all over the place and crashing. Also, if you ever hit something like a tree, for example, you can always take back control of it just by letting go of all the sticks, because all the sticks will center themselves and the drone will balance itself again. You just don't let go of the throttle, of course, or else your drone will fall to the ground. Next mode, horizon mode. Horizon mode is another flight mode. It's in between acro and angle mode, where there is an angle limiter at a certain level, but if you push your stick all the way to the right or to the left or the front or the back, you will be able to do flips. But if you ever hit something like in angle mode, you can always let go of the sticks and your quad will level itself again. So basically you have a little bit more freedom, but you can always trust the drone to level itself back if you ever hit something, and can take control of it again. And talking about modes, you might be wondering, where is acro mode? You only have angle mode and horizon mode, but where's acro mode? Well, in reality, acro mode isn't an actual mode that you can find in the modes tab. It's really just a mode that becomes a mode when no other mode is active. So most of the time you'll probably put all the modes on one switch, so probably on a 3-position switch. So you would have angle mode at one point, horizon mode at another point, and then you'd have acro mode later on. But basically, the way you activate acro mode is by having that switch in a position where angle mode and horizon mode are not active. Then it turns into acro mode, and the drone will know it is acro mode, and you'll be able to do flips. And if you don't know what acro mode is, it's basically you have complete freedom in all the movements you can do with your drone. You can do flips, you can roll, you can really just do anything. It's the mode that racers use to fly, and it's also the mode that you use for freestyling. It's more for more advanced pilots. Like I said, angle mode, horizon mode, very good for beginners. It's getting used to flying the drone. Acro mode, you're getting really good at it. So more for, I guess you could say, pros. Next mode, head free. Head free, if you're flying FPV like I do, you're not going to be using head free, because head free is when basically, like it says, it's head free. So your drone, doesn't matter in which direction it is pointing, if you push your right stick forward or away from you, your drone will always go away from you. That's kind of why you don't use it in FPV. It's really only for line of sight pilots who don't necessarily want to always have to like turn your drone and learn to fly inverted to be able to bring back the drone to you. You just have to bring the stick back to you, and the drone will always come back to you. So it basically, the orientation of the drone doesn't matter at that point. Next mode, right under here, fail-safe. So a fail-safe is something that happens when your quad either loses connection with your radio, and basically when that happens, it just shuts off everything, and it's kind of like if you would disarm your drone, basically. So it just stops the motors and everything, and your drone will fall to the ground. The reason why there is a fail-safe mode, because obviously you might be wondering, what's the point of making your drone crash on purpose? Well, let's say you want to test something. For example, you have a return home function that you set up on your drone, and you want to test it out without actually causing a real fail-safe. You can have this set up on one of your aux switches, and when you flip it, it acts like if a fail-safe would actually happen, and you can test out to see if your return home function, your GPS, actually works. Obviously, there are other ways of testing if the fail-safe works. For example, just by turning off your radio. But because then when you do that, your quad does lose connection with your radio. But the problem with that is that it does take a while to turn back on your radio. So having a switch that you can just flip instantly is perfect, because what happens if there's a problem? Your radio's turned off, you can't turn it back on to take control fast enough. You might lose your drone, you might break a drone, you might even hurt someone. So having the fail-safe switch is perfect, because if something doesn't go right, you can just flip the switch again, and then your drone will stop and you'll have control over it again. So yeah, that's the point of the fail-safe mode. The next mode is head adjust mode. This goes back to head free mode. It's more for line of sight pilots. It's not at all for FPV pilots, actually. Basically what this does is when you flip the switch, you depending on in which how your drone is oriented, one side will become the front of the drone and the other side will become the back, and the others left and right. So it's just to choose which side of the drone will be your front, back, left, and right. Don't use it in acro mode, FPV, it's completely useless. If you want to get better at line of sight, you can use it. It's really only for that. That's head adjust. So head adjust and head free mode are kind of linked. Next mode is the beeper mode. So beeper mode is very useful for, let's say you're flying your drone and in a field, for example, you crash and you can't see your drone, and your goggles, there's too much distortion. Probably the antenna is bent, and you don't have a good connection with your VTX. So you can't see where your drone is. The beeper is perfect for that because you can flip a switch, and then your drone will emit a sound, and with that you'll be able to figure out where your drone is. The only thing is that on smaller drones like Tiny Whoops, like this one over here, there's no beeper, so that mode doesn't actually work. But on bigger drones like the one I'm using right now, the TS130, which is a 3-inch drone, or even 5-inch drones, there's probably always going to be a beeper, so you can use this mode. Yeah, now LED low, this is only a mode that appears if you have LEDs on your drone. Basically what this is it basically lowers the LEDs because it is pretty bright. You can change the brightness of the LED basically. Next one is OSD disable. So in the OSD tab, you've got a bunch of things that you can put on your screen. But what happens if, let's say, it feels too cluttered, all you want to see is what your drone is seeing and you want to fly with that for a little bit. The OSD disable is perfect for that because, like it says, it disables the on-screen display. So basically all the stuff that you added onto your display disappears and you only have what the drone sees. It's something that it's really just your choice. You don't need to, it's not necessary. It's if you want to use it, you can. I don't usually have it on, simply because on my OSD I have the battery voltage. I also have the warnings for when I have to land, which I find very useful. And I recommend that you don't always keep OSD disabled because the displays can be very useful a lot of the time. But if you want to turn off the display, you can. It's there. Next one, black box. So just like a black box on a plane, it stores the black box stores black box data. It's useful for if you want to see if there was ever a problem during your flight. But the only way of saving black box data is... Oh, 1 second. 1 second. The drone is overheating, so I gotta... There we go. Alright, we are going to connect the drone back. Yes, the battery was getting low, that's why, okay. So let's connect the drone again. There we go. Let's go back to Modes tab. Oh, I forgot to save. Okay, well, let's just turn all of these off. There we go. Where was I at? So I was at black box. So like I was saying, wait, let's just save that. So basically, the black box, it stores black box data, but the only way that your quad will be able to store black box data is if you have a data flash chip, which you usually do have, but it does not have much storage. Or you can have an SD card, which has much more storage. Basically, what the black box mode does is when you flip the switch, that's when it's going to start recording black box data. Because usually, if you don't have the mode, black box data will start recording right away when you flip your arm switch. Which isn't that really the best thing if you do use black box data sometimes and you don't want it to fill up all the times because you don't actually have an SD card? You only have a data flash chip which does not have much storage. I think data flash chips can only have like up to, I think, 10 minutes of flight time, data. So black box mode lets you choose when you record and when you do not record black box data. Next mode is FPV angle mix. This one's very complicated to explain. I actually have notes for it because I still have a very hard time explaining it myself. Basically, what you need to know for FPV angle mix is there's camera up tilt compensation that exists, and when you combine that with the roll and the yaw channels, it makes it seem like you have less up tilt than you actually have. This mode chooses if you enable or disable that combination to make it feel like you have less or more less up tilt than you actually have. If I'm being completely honest, never use this mode. Unless you really want to see what it does and test it out and see if you like it. If you're just a casual pilot and you're not actually going to get too serious about flying, don't use it. I don't use it either. It's not necessary, and it's very complicated to understand. So if you want to learn more about it, you can search it up, but I'm not going to go too much deeper in this, in the angle mixing. Next one, black box erase. This goes back to the black box mode. Basically what it does, if you flip the switch, it will erase the black box data you have stored in either your data flash chip or your SD card. If you want to keep the black box data, make sure you save it onto your computer, upload it onto your computer, and then erase it, because once you erase it, it's gone forever. But if you don't use black box, honestly, if you don't really use a black box, you don't need it. It's only for people who actually do a lot of tests. But yeah, that's black box erase. It just erases the black box data you have stored. Now, for the next three modes, camera control 1, camera control 2, and camera control 3. If you go into the ports tab, you've got UARTs over here. If you change one of the, if I remember correctly, it was the peripherals, or I think it was the peripherals. I don't use the camera controls, but basically, if you basically if you choose a run cam in the ports tab for one of your UARTs, what it's gonna do is, I'm not gonna do it because it's not the most useful thing, and I don't even think I have one. But if we go back to the modes tab, go back down here, the camera control 1 will be called camera Wi-Fi button. Camera control 2 will be camera power button, and the last one will be camera change mode. Basically, if you don't have a run cam set up in your UARTs in the ports tab, these three modes will do nothing. They will be completely useless. But basically, what they do, if you do have a run cam set up, what it will do is they will act like buttons on your camera, so you can basically use your switches on your controller to either turn on and off the Wi-Fi, I'm guessing, turn on and off the camera, and change the mode of the camera. It's not very useful for very casual pilots like me, and they're completely useless if you don't have a run cam. So I'm not going to go too much deeper in them. If you want to learn how to use them and what they exactly how they work, you can do some more research, but I'm not going to go too much deeper in this. So yeah, that's camera control 1, 2, and 3. They do nothing unless you have a run cam, basically. Next mode, flip over after crash. Now, flip over after crash is one mode that I really do like. Basically, what it says is what it is. Basically, if you crash and your drone is flipped over, what you can do is flip the flip over after crash switch, and then flip your arm switch, and then move your stick so that your drone will then flip over. This mode is also called turtle mode because, I guess, kind of like a turtle that's flipped over on its back, you can flip it back. But yeah, so the way it works is that it only activates two motors at a time, depending on which direction you're pushing your stick. And by doing that, it reverses the motors. That's a very important thing. It reverses the motors, and then only spins two of them at a time. So depending on in which direction you're pointing your stick, it will push the drone in that direction, and then it will flip over. So yeah, that's flip over after crash. I really like this mode. It's a very useful mode because you don't know, if you crash, you don't always have to go walk and go get it to flip it over and go back to fly. But something you need to be careful about is that your propellers are touching the ground when that happens. So be very careful, because you don't want to break your propellers. And if you're in grass, you don't want grass to get stuck in your motors. And yeah, so just be mindful of that when you're using flip over after crash. Now, the next mode is pre-arm. So pre-arm is, honestly, I don't even know why it exists, because basically what pre-arm does is it's basically an arming for the arming, because you won't be able to arm your drone if the pre-arm is not armed. It's an extra safety. Some people like to use it for extra safety. I don't see the point in using it, because already the drone will not fly if your throttle is not completely at the bottom at 0. Even if you flip the arm switch, it's not going to work. So literally, instead of using pre-arm, you could just bring up your throttle all the way up, and then when you're ready to fly, bring it down and then arm it. But basically, pre-arm is just a safety for the safety. If you want to use it, you can. I don't recommend using it because it's kind of useless. It's a waste of using a switch. But yeah. Now, the next mode, VTX pit mode. So, VTX pit mode, it was made because VTXs have problems where they interfere with other pilots, and when that happens, the pilot loses the visual of their drone, and they can't see anymore, which can cause problems. The drone will crash and everything, and then they're going to be mad at you if that happens too. So VTX pit mode, they made this so when you're close to other pilots, you can flip the switch for VTX pit mode, and when you turn on your quad, what it's going to do is it's going to put the VTX, it's going to make the VTX go into a very low power mode, where it's able to broadcast enough video to be able to see something if you have your goggles right next to the VTX, but not enough to be able to interfere with other pilots or see something when you're flying. So it's really useful if you're like on the bench working on something, and you're around other pilots. Next mode, paralyze. Dumbest mode I have ever seen in my life. I'm not even kidding. Paralyze, basically what it does is it literally shuts down the drone. If you flip the switch, it shuts down the drone. Nothing works. The only way to make it work again is by power cycling it again, which basically you got to turn it off and on again. I don't see the point in doing this, because I cannot think of a time where you would need to just shut down your drone completely. Like I can't think of a time where you would need to do that. So I'm just telling you, don't use it, honestly. Like, really just don't use it at all. It's better to not touch it at all. Anyways, next mode, acro trainer. So acro trainer is for line of sight pilots again. Because some line of sight pilots do fly in acro mode. It's hard, but it's possible. And basically what this does is there will be an angle limiter when you're flying. It's kind of gonna be a little bit like horizon mode, but what was I saying? It's kind of like horizon mode, but it's for line of sight pilots. So there's basically an angle limiter on the when you're flying, but you can still practice your acro mode, do flips and all. Yeah, that's basically what the acro trainer does. If you're flying FPV, which is what most people do, you don't need it, so I'd say just don't use it. But if you're trying to fly line of sight, it's there. It could be fun. But yeah, next mode is which one is it? Next mode is VTX control disable. Basically, what VTX control disable does is that it lets you use the buttons on your VTX to change the band, channel, and the output power of the VTX. This also disables smart audio or tram telemetry. I'd say just don't touch this mode because this mode disables smart audio, which is what controls the VTX. And today, because we have smart audio that controls it, there's no point in disabling the smart audio, because the fact that smart audio or tram telemetry controls the VTX gives us less work. So I'd say just don't touch it. The next mode is launch control. So launch control is used a lot by racers because basically what this does is when you flip the launch control switch and then the arming switch, it will put your drone in a more angled position, like this, which is actually the position you'll be racers usually fly in. This launch control will let the racer have a much smoother and faster takeoff than if they did not have launch control, where they would have to start take off like this and then go like this. Whereas with launch control, they start like this and they just go like this, so it's much faster than not using launch control. If you're not a racer, there's no point in using it. But if you want to try it, you can. It doesn't change anything too much. It just makes you start at in an angled position when you arm the drone. But yeah, that's launch control. Second to last mode, stick command disable. Basically, this mode, like it says, it disables the stick commands. In Betaflight, everyone knows that there are stick commands that you can put in to do certain things. I don't really remember what they do because I don't use them. But basically, stick commands disable is where you can disable the stick commands. So I'm guessing some people are probably scared of accidentally putting one in and then screwing something up. But the thing is that, what are the chances that you actually put in a stick command on your remote? Like, actually, what are the chances of that happening? Because you need to be very precise in where you place the stick for the stick command to work. So the chances of you accidentally putting one in are very low. So I feel like this mode is not that useful. And now, finally, the last mode, beeper mute. So, beeper mute is a mode that is useful if you get annoyed with the beeper a lot. Because let's say you're working on the bench and then suddenly your drone starts beeping. That probably gets really annoying. So you can use the beeper mute switch to turn off the beeper. So when it's supposed to beep, it will not beep. It will not make any noise. Don't keep that on all the time, because when you need to find your drone, you won't be able to find it because you don't have any beeper. So, but if you're working on your quad on the bench and you need to mute the beeper, it's perfect. But yeah, that's the beeper mute. All right, we went through every single mode. Now I'm gonna tell you which ones I recommend using, and I'll show you how to set them up. So, first one that we need to set up is the arm switch. So of course you need an arm switch for this to work. So I'm just going to plug in the drone again because I had to unplug the battery before. Just plug this in, turn on the radio. There.
Welcome to OpenTX.
So how do you actually set this up? Well, over here on ARM you have add range. Click on add range and then you'll see this pop up over here. Now this is where knowing which switch is which is important. Because over here you can choose which switch you want to use for the arming. Or you can also just do auto, which basically what this does is you flip whatever switch you want on your radio and it's going to apply it to the arm or whatever mode you're trying to set up. So I'll flip this switch aux1. There. Now my aux1 switch is my arming switch. But for it to work, for the arm switch to work, you need to place this yellow bar over here at the position you want this little tick to be for your drone to be armed. So let's say I want this position to be my arming position. So I'm going to take this over here, the yellow bar, and drag it all the way to the tick. And then with the edges, I can adjust it to make it smaller. Don't make it too small, because if you make it any smaller, sometimes you might not end up exactly at the same spot, and it might screw up the arming, and it might not always work. So I'd say about this size is perfect. So now, when it's like this, when I flip the switch in this position, it's disarmed. When I flip it like this, it's armed. So now, next one, the next mode I recommend using is angle mode. I actually use angle mode and horizon mode. So basically, don't click add link, click add range again, and I'm going to say this switch. So I'm using a 3-position switch, so I'll flip this switch like this. Okay, now it's aux3 in this switch. And I want angle mode to be in this position, so I'm just going to drag this over here and adjust it. There we go. There, so now this is angle mode. Now let's add horizon mode, so I'll click add range again, and over here I'll flip the exact same switch, aux3, like this. Now they're both applied to aux3, but over here I want the middle position for the switch to be horizon, so I'll adjust this. And now when aux3 is in position 1, it's going to be angle mode, aux3 is in position 2, it's going to be horizon mode, and finally, when aux3 is in position 3, it's going to be acro mode, because in this position, angle mode and horizon mode, none of them are active. So this is going to be our acro mode. Next mode that I recommend using, where is it? I actually use the beeper with this drone. So we are going to add the beeper to one of our switches. So we click add range again. And I'm going to flip, let's do this switch over here. Okay, so now it's aux2. This is a 3-switch switch, but I can choose to just use one position. So I'll make it position 3 as my beeper there. So now when I'm in position 3, it's going to be my beeper. Now the last mode, because I only have 4 switches, so the last mode I really like to use, where did it go? It's actually flip over after crash. So add range, I'm going to flip the switch, and now it's aux4, and I'm just going to move the bar to where it needs to be. Oh wait, flip over after crash has to be in this position. There we go. So I'm going to bring the position over here and adjust it. And there we go. Now all you got to do is save, and once it's saved, all the modes should work. So at the start of this video, I was actually talking about something that made the drone beep. This is because I flipped the arm switch that was already applied. I flipped it and it was armed, but the problem is that when your drone is connected to your computer for Betaflight, it will not be allowed to arm. So if I arm the switch over here, it's going to start beeping. And if I go into setup over here you see arming disable flags. If I flip it, it says arm switch, and it disabled the arming switch because I flipped the arm switch, which is why the arming is disabled, because I'm connected. So let's go back to modes. And now if I check to see if these work, you see the drone beeps every time I switch the mode. That's perfect. And now beeper, if I flip the switch for beeper, the beeper works. And then, I mean, flip over after crash, I would have to show you when I'm actually flying. But yeah, so flip over after crash should work. Yep, you see it turns yellow, it works. There. So those are all the modes that I equip. If you have got more switches, you can apply more of them. You can choose which ones you want, to just rewatch the video if you need to see what they do. And yeah, that's it. That's how you set up the modes. Alright, so this is the end of the video. I hope you understood. I hope you liked the video. If you have any questions, as usual, put them in the comments. And like the video and subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next video.